Got it. Okay. All right. So here we go. So Erickson's model is very much what we call a conflict model, that at certain points of life, we come across this conflict that we have, that we become successful or unsuccessful at. And just as I mentioned on Thursday, what we're going to present the model exactly as Erickson's original one, that you have either you develop, for example, trust versus mistrust, and it was very dichotic. But what I would encourage everybody to do as you listen to the lecture is to put this on a continuum. So if you want to see, are you on more on the trust side, the mistrust, maybe in the middle? Because it really, the world is not perfect and it's not imperfect. Okay. Or I should say completely perfect or completely imperfect. So for example, even though I tried really hard to be a dad, I know I had bad days. So I know my son is somewhere, based on my parenting at least, somewhere between trust and mistrust. And I hope that he's more on the trusting side. I hope I did a good enough job that he's more towards that end than the other end. So, but we're going to present it as kind of the dichotic, either you have trust or mistrust, just to emphasize the extremes. That some individuals may lay on as far as this is concerned. Okay. And then the other comment that is always asked, so if I don't develop trust or mistrust in infancy, as an adult, can I develop this? The answer is absolutely yes. It's just you'll need to put a little bit more work into it because it didn't happen during the ultimate developmental stage. You can still gain a sense of trust, but it will just take a little bit more work. And that's just like with language. If you're trying to learn a foreign language as an adult, it's much more difficult to do that than if you were to have learned it between about the age of 2 to 6. So it's just that you have to put in that extra work. Okay. So let's go through this. And so I do believe we were kind of getting through the infancy stage, and we emphasized that the reason why trust and versus mistrust develops during infancy is up until about 1.5 years of age, we're really completely and totally dependent on our caregiver. We depend on them for food, warmth, changing us, all of those kinds of things. So Erickson felt that this was the perfect time for us to develop trust versus mistrust. Now, again, I want to just kind of remind everybody that you got to remember that our first language is emotions. So while children may not understand the words we use, infants understand the emotions we're giving. Okay. So let's go with the trust part. Simply going like this, and I'll mark them as we go along. So trust, what does trust look like? Well, let's just go through a basic scenario with mom and baby. Okay. Baby cries, mom shows up, feeds baby, and then you have that moment of reciprocation, that kind of this is the first what they call the mother child dance in a sense. Or in these days and whatnot, you could say primary caregiver and infant dance, whoever is that person that is there for that infant. Um, and the thing that I want you to recognize at this point is that reciprocation is the infant is giving back for what they receive. They're giving that cute little smile and that little eye contact saying, hey, we're in this together. Okay, um, so anyways, so baby cries, mom feeds, leaves. A little while later, baby cries, mom comes, changes, baby mom leaves, baby cries, and mom shows up and rocks the little guy to sleep, or little girl. And so what is the infant learning? If I need something, someone will show up. And as long as we have that moment of gratitude, that moment of reciprocation, that will happen again in the future. Okay. Now, what about mistrust? Okay, well, mistrust sounds something like this. Baby cries. Now, and again, just like I did last Thursday, because I think we got to this point before we lost our internet last Thursday. So I just want to remind you to feel the emotions. I'll try and not have all the other offices here around here, but to feel the emotions, not necessarily the words. Okay. So baby cries, no one shows up. Baby cries, no one shows up. Baby cries, no one shows up. Baby cries, mom comes in and says, "What do you need now? You're always bothering me when it's difficult. What could you possibly need?" Okay. Again, I want you to feel that emotion if I conveyed it correctly. And again, does the baby understand what mom is saying? No, but the baby under feels it. They feel it and they understand it at that emotional level. Okay, that's why when infants start to develop language, they don't go say stuff like, "Wow, mom really treated me like an asshole when I was an infant." Okay, because they're feeling it at the emotional level, not at that cognitive level. And what is the infant learning, though, at this point, if we were to put that learning into words? If I need someone, I can't rely on anyone. And when someone does show up, they make me feel like I am the problem, that it's that I must need help because I'm useless, I'm harmful. And that's why in this next developmental phase, the infant is going to develop something called shame and doubt. Okay. So shame is the feeling of feeling not sure if what you did was right or wrong. Okay. Now I should slow down here for a minute. These developmental stages assumes, this is an assumption, that nothing in the child's environment has changed significantly. So this child that was in this mistrusting phase, they have that same parent in the next phase, or that same caregiver in that next phase. So I just wanted to mention that really quick. So shame is constantly feeling like what I'm doing is wrong, because I'm always yelled at. Either I don't get a response or I'm always yelled at. And then doubt is the feeling that I'm not sure if I could even do this or not, because I I don't know anything. I'm left alone. If we want to put this in perspective, this is the child who is severely neglected in a sense. Okay. Now, to go back to what is a child experiencing during early childhood, during this phase of development? Well, one, they're learning to interact with their world. They're exploring their world. Okay. They're going and trying um, they're trying to understand um, about this world. Remember, if we look at it from this perspective, this is about the sensory motor phase of development, and they're trying to interact and understand their world. So what does autonomy look like? And now we're going to expand on that notion of the mother-child dance, okay? And we're going to state this. What healthy autonomy looks like is the little child goes and plays in their room for about 10, 15 minutes, sometimes shorter if they have some inattentiveness and whatnot, or that's boring. But let's go with, so they go play for 10 minutes. And then let's say mom's in the kitchen and the little kiddo goes and learning language and says, "Hi, mom, just coming in, checking in on you. Hope everything's good, looking good." And then they go back and play for another 10 minutes. And then 10 minutes later, they go and, "Hi, mom, just letting you know I'm here. It's almost getting lunchtime, and then they go back for 10 minutes and they do this dance kind of thing with the mother, going back and forth to from exploration to what's known as the secure base. When we get to attachment theory, we'll see that moms and dads are what known in that language as the secure base. And what they're doing is just checking in, doing that reciprocation that they did in infancy to assure mom, hey, I'm here, we're here, everything's good, love you. And then they're going back and exploring, because what they want to know is they want to make sure this relationship is developed, so that while they're exploring, if they get in trouble, they know mom will show up. Okay. Now, in the shame or doubt section, what we're going to have is we're going to have, again, later on, we'll talk about attachment disorders. But basically, this is the child that in Erickson term, either has nothing to do with the parents. Okay, this is a child that can go play all day long and not even have a concern about interacting with the parent. And when the parent comes and tries to play with the child kind of shuns them off in a sense. Or it is the child who is constantly clingy, and clingy to the thing that if the parent does something, they'll throw a fit, they'll react aggressively, they'll cry excessively, they'll do anything, because if you think about it, in the situation is they're not sure when the next time that parent is going to have attention for them. So they seek it in extreme ways. Okay. So this is kind of that autonomy versus shame. And again, I just want to emphasize one more time before we go on, is everyone is on a continuum with this. Okay. And a good example is that if let's say you have a single parent income home, so mom is at home, dad is at work, and let's say one day mom has to go somewhere, a conference or something, and dad is there now as a primary caretaker, because that autonomy wasn't developed with that parent who is more out of the house. The child may react more closer to the middle between these two, or even to more of the shameful doubt area, because they quite haven't learned how to create those relationships until the play years of 3 to 5 years. Okay. So what happens here? Again, nothing changes in the child's environment. This child who has developed trust and autonomy will most likely develop something we call initiative. Okay. This child with shame and doubt is going to develop the notion of guilt. Okay. So let's look at the initiative. And I know I have said this several times in this class, and I hope everyone is getting the point about this. The age between 3 and I would say even 6, play is a very, very important developmental part of development. Even when we look at peoples who haven't been touched by Western cultures, like people in the Amazon, New Guinea, and those places. And then even when we look in the African and Asian countries, we find that during this period is the more engaged the child is in play and interaction, the better off they are. Okay, so encourage your kids to play. The other thing that we're starting to do is we're starting to interact with other children. So during this age group, this is when a lot of children really start interacting with their siblings, if they have siblings in the house. This is where a lot of children end up childcare, preschool, kindergarten years start during these periods. And so we start to interact more with other children, and we're developing this idea. We're going from this to, can I create what I have with mom and dad with interaction with other children. And so the child with initiative is willing to approach other children. They're willing to try and engage them in some type of play or interaction. It's a child in a classroom who goes up to a small group and says, "Hey guys, let's go to the swing, or let's go to the book area," or whatever that may be. Okay. And what is this? And if you think about this, this is the development also of things like confidence, right? The precursors to what we would call leadership as adults, those kinds of things. Okay. Guilt, if you think of the term guilt, this is where shame and doubt as an emotional state becomes something that the child now thinks about. Okay. So guilt really is that on the first part, I don't know if I should be doing what I'm about to do. And then the second part is when I do something, I get concerned that I did it wrong, or it's going to upset someone, or it's going to, make someone angry, or it might be completely ignored altogether. And again, we follow this same tract of outcomes from shame and doubt to guilt, in that a lot of these children either disengage from the world, or they maintain that they have a very difficult time um, uh, letting go of mom. But also if mom leaves and they return, they act angry that the parent had left in the first place. And again, when we get to attachment theory, we'll look at this kind of interactions to different types of attachment styles. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go more from a smaller interaction to larger interaction in the school age years, from 5 to 12, or you could say 5 to, puberty maybe. Our social world has expanded, and we're learning new skills. We're learning to write. Maybe we're learning a sports. We're learning how to play an instrument of some type and whatnot. And so I kind of want to use these ideas to kind of explain industry versus inferiority. Okay. Industry, and I'll kind of role play this. Industry is little Billy strums on the guitar at home, and mom and dad clap and say, "You're going to be our future super guitar player, our next superstar. You're doing awesome." And little Billy kind of goes, "Oh, mom and dad think I'm good at this. I wonder what my friends at school would think." And so little Billy goes to school, strums on his guitar, and all of his friends say, "Yeah, we're gonna be your roadies. Well, you're awesome. We're gonna have a band someday. That's cool." What is this child learning? He's learning that that given skill has industry. And what does industry in Erikson's terms mean? Industry means that what you're doing has value for other people. Okay. So in Billy's example, playing the guitar has a value to someone else. So they'll continue to do that because it's valuable to Billy, but it's also valuable to other people. And kind of going back to a little bit of Piaget's theory, if you remember this age from pretty much 0 to 5 is marked by egocentrism, right? That what matters is my feelings, my emotions, my thoughts, and everyone around here is for my muse. Okay. But now we're learning, hey, other people have their own thoughts, their own ideas, and they like some things that I do. And so we start to kind of leave that egocentric idea to more of a sociocentric idea. Okay. Now, on the other side of the continuum, we have the notion of inferiority. And the inferiority is this idea that I don't meet to anybody's criteria. What I do doesn't matter. This is where little Billy plays guitar at home, and dad comes in and says, "Billy, I thought I told you not to play that guitar while I'm at work, while I'm at home." You can do it when I'm at work, but don't play that garbage when I'm home. And so little Billy feeling maybe rejected by dad and parents goes to school, and everyone at school is like, Billy, you really should try to do something else. You kind of suck at this, okay? And so this is the experience that maybe a boy or a girl is developing a sense of inferiority, that what they do doesn't have value. Therefore, if nothing I do does not have value, I myself don't have value. Okay. And so this has two trajectories. Okay. This is where the child will either become kind of a quote unquote the loner, uh, avoids people. They might become sensation seekers and try to find some artificial way of feeling well. And also, also is one of the basis of our early versions of understanding bullying behavior. Okay. Inferior, one way for me not to feel inferior is to control someone else in a mean and aggressive way and make them less than what I feel I am. Okay. And this is one of the earlier theories of bullying behavior. I just want to allow you to keep that in mind as we move along, because what not only does it create bullying behavior, the child who is inferior also is the easiest target for bullying. Okay. Because if you have industry, you have confidence, you have self-esteem, you have all of those things. So the bully isn't going to look for the child who has industry. Now, with that being said, when we get to middle childhood and young childhood, we will look at this a little bit, because this theory is broken in several ways. And so I just want to say that this is just one of the earlier theories of bullying, but is it accurate to the data that we have today? A little bit, but not the majority. So, and I'll leave that at that, and we'll have a conversation about bullying when we get to the school age and into adolescence. Okay. So just wanted to put that out there. All right. So again, nothing changes in the child's life. We get into adolescence now. Uh, Erickson picked identity versus role confusion for this period because the child is recognizing that they're changing. So they're going through puberty and they're gaining their physical body. And so they're recognizing that they're physically changing. That must mean they must be emotionally changing. They must be their world is changing. And kind of one way to emphasize this, you hear the common notion that the adolescence tries to start disconnecting from the family. The evidence for this comes from simple questions you can ask an adolescent versus a child who is 5, 6, or 7 years old. Simply ask them who they are. Okay. If they're in the childhood years, they're probably going to say, I'm John and Melissa's son. Okay. But in adolescence, you ask who they are, they'll say, oh, I'm a soccer player, or I'm a jock, or I'm a stoner, or something like that. They'll identify with what they do, not who they belong. Okay. Now, this is a broad statement to make, but that's kind of the idea about where we head with this. So let's talk about what is a healthy identity versus what is not, or what becomes what we call role confusion. Okay. I'm going to flip to a blank slide. So I like using the analogy of something that William James came up with. And William James, just so everyone knows, he's kind of the father of American psychology. He is one of the first who wrote a textbook and really tried to explore the ideas of the mind from kind of an American perspective. Okay. And so he came up with the notion of the self concept. Okay. The self concept is everything that you can say is you. Okay. And he divided the self-concept into two. One part of the self-concept is what you call your social self. Okay. This is everything that you are that is provided to you and is defined by your social world. So, what are some examples of this? Mother, father, student, male, female, non-binary, um, um, uh, your even right down to your ethnicity, your race, all of those are socially defined variables. Okay. It's not something you were born with, it's something that is socially given to you. And everyone else says, I was born a man or a woman. But then, we can say, well, what if in our social world we defined women as individuals who have external genitalia and men as someone who has internal genitalia. So, and that's what means by social determinant. So, yeah, we're all born with internal or external genitalia, but that's meaningless until it's given a social context. Okay. And then the second part of our self-concept is what is originally it was called the spiritual self, according to William James. This is now considered the personal self. Okay, I'll just put person since I'm spelling really slow with this. The personal self is everything that makes you unique compared to the person sitting by you. So this is intelligence level, personality, temperament, uh, whether you're highly emotional or very little emotional. These are everything that is unique about you that kind of sets you apart from the person sitting next to you. Okay. So now based on this, what is a healthy self-concept or healthy identity? Well, what we have learned is a healthy identity is someone who has multiple identities. And so I'll just use four as an example. So let's say, take a young lady, and let's say her identity is a good daughter, maybe a good soccer player represented by S, and let's say good at math. And then let's say a good girlfriend. She has an identity of being someone who is a good, faithful girlfriend, as we say. So we have D for daughter, S for soccer, M for math, and GF for girlfriend. Okay. Now, what makes this a healthy identity? Well, let's say this young lady's boyfriend breaks up with her. So now this identity is in crisis. Okay. Um, but because this young lady has developed a good identity as a daughter, good identity as a soccer player, and a good identity as someone good at math, she can look at herself and her self-esteem is not going to be affected much because she says, okay, and I know it's much more emotional than this, please excuse me, but basically on a cognitive level, okay, so I got to figure out what I did wrong as a girlfriend or what happened as a girlfriend, but I'm still a good daughter. I'm still good at soccer. I'm still good at math. So I'm still a good person. I'm still okay. Okay. What is So now what is a purely undeveloped identity, or what Erickson called role confusion? Okay. Role confusion comes in two forms. Okay. And I'll just put two circles just to represent them. Okay. One form is where the young person has one singular identity. Whoops. Okay. And I'm going to illustrate this effect by bringing up working with football players at a college that I used to work at that had dorms and they had a college program. But what was unique about this college is the recruitment for football players. They would go to tier 1 and tier 2 universities and recruit good players who were basically being kicked out of the university for either poor academic performance or behavioral issues. So they're really good players, but they have difficulty navigating the university world. Okay. And so they come to this college, and they realize that it's their last chance to either get back to a tier 1 university or to go pro. Okay, to go to the FNL, I think it is. I don't to the big times. I'll put it that way. Now, around December and January is typically when both universities and the NFL do their recruiting and their recruiting. And somewhere around December and January, I always made sure I had time because I was getting referrals from football players to come to my office, because during this time we saw an uptick in things like aggressive behaviors, excessive drinking, excessive partying, even relationship violence and sexual violences of some type. And so I'd bring these young men in and say what's going on, and they said, well, I was rejected by universities and I was rejected by the NFL, and now I don't know what to do with my life. I'm done. And we kind of go, why? And it basically what it is that both the family and this individual uh, spent their life defining this individual as just a football player. And that's what their world about. That's who they are. They didn't have any other, defining features such as maybe being good at math or soccer, like our example here, or whatnot. And now their life is at ruin. So what do human beings do when they get to a roadblock? They either settle for it and just pull away, or we start doing high risk behaviors. It's kind of a human nature type thing. Um, and so this is the idea of having a singular identity. Now we know outside of that, individuals who have just that identity have difficulties interacting with the world. They tend to become narcissistic. They tend to become very difficult to work with because this is what they're defined as, and they don't see themselves in any other way. Okay. And so this individual. This is a form of role confusion, that not being able to see yourself outside of one singular identity. The other version is, and you'll notice that I'm just going to leave a blank circle here, is this is when you go to an adolescent and say, who are you? And they say, well, I'm not a jock, I'm not a stoner, I'm not a nerd, I'm not this, I'm not that. And then you ask, but who are you? And they repeat the same thing. Well, I'm not a jock, I'm not a stoner, and so on and so on. But when you try to dig down to who they are, how they define themselves, they can define themselves as who they're not, but they can't define themselves as who they are. Okay, meaning that really they have an empty identity. Okay, and the consequences of this is that the individuals tend to get into adulthood and they have difficult times with employers. They have difficult times with relationships. They have difficult times interacting and developing friendships and those kinds of things, because everything that they're not becomes those people who are insulting them. So this is the individual who goes to the workplace and says, you know what, that boss doesn't know what they're talking about. This company knows nothing about what's going on in the real, and they become that kind of individual who is constantly rejecting everything that is coming towards them. Okay. And so these are the two kind of different types of role confusion that were kind of noted within Erikson's theory. And then again, a healthy identity. I know this sounds strange. I'm not talking about multiple personalities. Okay. I'm talking about multiple identities. Is healthiness, is having areas in your life that you focus on, not just one singular component. And I'll note, when it comes to parents, we find, parents who completely focus on their kids 100% of the time have difficulties when they become empty nesters. They tend to start entering again high risk behaviors and those kinds of things. And that's why just on the parenting end, I just read a research article on this, sorry, so I'm just bringing it up now. Um, uh, on the parenting end, investing your complete life into your children is not always the smartest idea, that you need to have your own separate identities outside of just being a parent. So kind of an interesting finding I recently looked at. All right. So this is identity versus role confusion. And as you can guess, if you're able to trust someone, if you have a sense of individualism or individual being, you have initiative, you know what you do, the things that you do good has a value towards other people, and then you have a healthy sense of who you are. This is going to lead to someone who is able to enter uh, intimate relationships um, uh, um, good, and they can identify those people who may be healthy for them or unhealthy. But let me rewind for a minute. So we go through adolescence and then we hit this young adult years, and we got to change some of these um, uh, periods, because young adult today is considered somewhere from about 18 to about 35, and then middle adulthood. And I know this sounds really ambiguous, because what about 35 to 40? But middle adulthood now is around 40. So that 35 to 40 is kind of this transition period. Okay. Um, so what's happening during young adulthood? I'll say this very simply, and I think this starts much earlier than this. But when we look at 18 to about 25 years old, men think about it every 90 seconds, and women on average think about it every 2 to 3 hours, and that's sex. So 90 seconds, 2 to 3 hours is average. Now, there's variability in that, but that's the average. So based on that, a lot of theorists say, well, we're learning how to develop families, independence, work. But what Erickson would argue, that our primary drive during this period is to develop intimate relationships, for individuals to start to develop family and develop that sense of being. Okay. So healthy intimacy is just this ability to get into an intimate relationship, set boundaries for yourself and for them, being able to identify people who are healthy for you versus unhealthy for you. And as you could guess, it's developed down this left line of Erickson's spectrum, or Erickson's conflict stages. So now, what is isolation on an intimate level? And I want to make this very clear. This is not physical isolation. This is psychological isolation. Okay. And it comes in two basic forms. One form is where an individual uh, focuses on non-human endeavors in order to avoid any type of intimacy. So this is the stereotypical Catwoman, dog guy. This is the workaholic. This is the person who invests everything they have into their car and make it, a hot rod of some type. It's basically someone who tries to focus on non-human relationships completely in order to avoid that intimacy. And if you can think about it, if you don't trust anybody, if you have guilt, you feel like you're not well fitted for doing anything right, and you're not sure who you are, that's kind of almost a practical thing to do if you think about it. The second version of psychological isolation is people who really do want intimate relationships. They really do want to be loved. But what happens is they get into a relationship, and the relationship goes about up to maybe about 6 to 8 months, and then they dump the person. and say, we're not doing this. No, and sometimes they might actually be already developing an intimate relationship with someone else. Okay. Now, what is it about the 6 to 8 month period in a relationship is usually when we go into intimate relationships, in the beginning, we provide our best selves, right? So if we invite the partner over to the house is clean, the dishes are done, we're not in our PJs, the bathroom's clean, the bed's made, all those things, right? And we're showing our best selves. Well, something about human nature is this: we can't uh, keep our complete self bottled up. Okay. We can't always be the best versions of ourselves because that's simply not being human. So somewhere down the line, maybe starting around 4 months or sometimes earlier, you might be sitting on the couch and your partner lifts up their cheek and lets out a fart. You start to go over to their place and you notice the dishes aren't done and the bed's not made. You go home and you go into your bathroom and you notice there's two toothbrushes, not just one. Let's see, maybe you now have a different key on your keychain. Those kinds of things start to develop. And there's two things going on here. If you think about what's going on in this scenario, one, things are getting real. Okay. We're really seeing our real selves. The second thing that's happened is you got that extra key ring and that extra toothbrush, and you start kind of demanding things of each other. We're getting to the notion of commitment. Okay. And if you think about this, if you have mistrust, guilt, inferiority, you're not sure who you are, commitment is a scary thing. And so is the reality of being with someone. And therefore, the individual becomes, if you want to put it in this term, I don't know if this is the best term for it, frightened about what's going on. So they dump the person and then try to get into another relationship. So that's intimacy versus isolation. And again, when I really think about this, we're all somewhere on this continuum. I don't think anyone has complete intimacy or complete isolation. I think we're all somewhere on this continuum. And I think we could be on this continuum for different types of intimate relationships. So just something to think about. Okay. So now we're going to enter into middle adult years. Okay, where we've got by now we've got careers going, we have families being raised. Um, uh, we're hopefully in our first home, for example. And what we do at this point is we kind of look back on our life and we go, yeah, on the generative end. So if you think of generative as generous or generosity, the generative end, the person looks back in his life and he goes, okay, I've been in a healthy marriage for 20 years. Both of our kids are going to college. I'm doing really well in work. We have a home. And the person thinks, okay, the world has been good to me. And so I need to give back to the world. And this is where, and again, it is kind of to this age group, this is where people tend to start getting more involved in, like, for example, their religion. This is where you see a lot of individuals start to get active with nonprofits, being on board of directors. This is where you start seeing individuals showing up to fundraisers for community events and those kinds of things. They start to give part of who they are back, okay? Because they feel like life has been good to them. Okay. On the stagnation end, we have an individual who thinks back and goes, oh gosh, I'm on my third marriage. I'm third marriage that is falling apart. My son is in jail. My daughter, I don't know where she is. I keep getting fired from job to job. This is my fifth apartment. Let's see how much more miserable we can make a person's life. Um, I have no friends. My family doesn't talk to me. I hope you're getting the point about this end of the continuum. And they go, you know what? This world isn't for me. I don't like it. Okay. And so what does this individual do? And there's many versions of stagnation. I mentioned at the beginning of class that somewhere between about the age of 35 to 40, individuals have this transition. And I mentioned it's 2 lifetimes kind of thing. This on one end of the stagnation, the person recognizes it. So they go back to school and they go and try and gain skills. They if they have addiction issues, they go to AA and they all of those kinds of things, and they start to build their life back. The other end of it, and this is kind of a stereotype. Okay, I want to make this very clear. It's kind of a stereotype. They try to go back into their life, their earlier years, and try to see where they missed out. What component of their life did they miss out? So this is the stereotype part of it. So this is the middle-aged man that goes and starts dating 20-year-olds and buys a sports car. This is the woman who goes and has a boob job and a facelift. Okay, trying to bring something back from their youth that they must have missed along the way. Okay. And I will say, I want to differentiate this from a midlife crisis. I know it sounds like that, but believe it or not, and I want to make this point very clear right now. This kind of midlife crisis that I'm kind of describing, most of us won't go through a midlife crisis. We will go through a transition phase, but most of us won't end up in this category, which is I think is a good thing. But anyways, they keep going back and they continue to destroy their lives even more. And we've seen people who have done this that have torn up homes and families. They end up in massive amounts of debt and those kinds of things. And it really doesn't work out for them. And so they kind of end up in that same trajectory that they had been in throughout their life with constant employment problems and relationship problems and the like. So luckily that's the minority of individuals, not the majority, even though I know we all know one. Okay. All right. So let's finish this up. We get into late adulthood. Okay. And we start to recognize something that we don't really recognize in our youth and even into a little bit of middle adulthood and everything else is we notice, our parents and siblings are passing away, close friends are passing away, and the like. And in earlier ages, we think, we're going to live forever. And in late adulthood, we realize, oh crap, this life is limited. This life is not going to continue. Okay. And so much like in the middle adulthood area, we go through a phase of looking back at our life because we realize what immortality is. Immortality is really being remembered after you're physically not there anymore. So it's your grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, great-great-great-great-grandchildren learning stories about you and you being remembered in some way. Okay. So again, on this end, the person looks back on their life and goes, I may have, had 2 marriages, but both of them were successful. My kids are successful. I made this change at the workplace that will continue to improve the workplace and all of these things. And I did my best to, and my family comes and actually visits me and tells me they love me. And so this is a person who's going to live out their life with what Erickson called ego integrity, meaning that they realize that they're going to be remembered and that they were prized throughout their life. Okay. And so on this end, these individuals actually do end up living longer than our other category. They tend to live healthier. They tend to pass away with quote unquote natural causes instead of diseased causes, and those kinds of things. And there's evidence to support this that we'll get into later in the semester. Versus the person who passes with despair. This is a person that looks back on their life and they never really had a healthy, intimate relationships. Maybe they're on their 10th wife or something. Their kids don't come visit them. They never were able to stay in a job long enough to really make huge differences. And so this is the individual who's going to spend their life out with despair. So they start to, and again, there's different trajectories for this. So this one is the person who starts living a severely unhealthy lifestyle. They refuse to go to the doctor, for example. They might excessively drink and have bad eating habits and those kinds of and whatnot. And they don't pay attention to their health. This is also on the other side of despair is this is a person who, kind of puts the rocking chair on the front porch and just sits there and waits for death to come. Okay. That really sounded depressing. Ooh. Okay. So that's Erickson's model. Now is his model completely correct? The answer is no, but we can use a lot of it as a springboard to talk about these different things. And I already emphasized the bullying thing. We'll use this as a springboard, but it's not totally accurate. The generativity thing, in reality, when I used to consult with nonprofits and they were struggling with fundraising, and they were always looking for, the wealthy to do people, the people who had the nice homes, own businesses to donate to their nonprofit. And I tell them, and the first thing I do is I say, stop that. Okay, you can work on that later when you've stabilized your nonprofit. The people you should be looking to donate and volunteer for your organizations is people who have experienced struggle. Okay, because for every one wealthy person that donates $50, I guarantee that you could get 20 low income individuals to donate $50. Okay. So you have a 1 to 20 ratio between a person who's wealthy and well-to-do will donate to people who are in low income struggling categories to donate. And so my point being is it's not always the person who has had the good life that ends up giving back to life. Okay. And that's another area of Erickson's theory that we got to kind of be careful of. We'll use it as a springboard when we get to a middle adulthood, but we'll need to qualify a lot of things when it comes to that. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing.